true honor and a huge joy to be here. To be here not because of the traditional hospitality of Sharjah and the United Arab Emirates, but to be in a part of the world that is navigating so well the changes. My objective today, for the next 15 minutes, is to shed light on the three major changes going on in the global economy. We will talk about the search for resilience, we will talk about innovation, and we'll talk about policy-driven changes. And I would argue that Sharjah and the United Arab Emirates are not just navigating it well so far, but are perfectly placed for what's ahead. My presentation will start by looking at the changes in the United States. Not only because the US is the most influential economy in the world, with the dollar, with its financial system, but because there's an attempt in the US to rewire not only the domestic economy, but also the global economy. So understanding what's going on in the US is going to be very important. We will talk about why you should not just focus on what's happening on the surface. And then we will focus on the drivers and conclude with UAE's special position in this world. If you look at the global economy, what is there not, and the US economy, what is there not to like about the US economy? Its growth has surprised everyone on the outside. In the second quarter, it had the highest growth rate in 2 years of 3.8%. In the third quarter, it will also have a 3% growth rate. The US is outperforming every other advanced economy in terms of growth, actual and potential. Inflation has come down. It's still higher than where the Federal Reserve wants it to be at 3%, but it's stable. And stable inflation is absolutely key to financial stability. Thirdly, interest rates are coming down. The only question debated right now within the Federal Reserve, and you see the expectations of different Federal Reserve officials, is by how much interest rates are going to come down. By a little or by a lot. But no one debates interest rates coming down. And the stock market is going from record to record. So on the surface, the US economy looks stable. But if you look beyond the surface, there are signals that suggest contradictions, that suggest changes. So let's talk about the first one. I grew up in a world that was simple. Stocks are risk assets. Gold is the opposite, a safe haven. So they move inversely to each other. For the last 2 years, both gold and stocks have gone from record high to record high. That is not normal. That is telling us something. Secondly, what's happening to the dollar? The dollar is having one of its worst years on record. It hasn't recovered like everything else from the April lows. Why is the dollar languishing? Thirdly, some people argue that the US is starting to act in places like in developing countries. Its fiscal situation is challenging. There's political pressure on the central bank. And there is a change in tariff policy, weaponization of tariff. You don't normally see this in the United States. And finally, how do you explain these unusual reserves? How do you explain that the rest of the world continues to admire US companies, continues to invest in US companies, but doesn't want dollar risk? Why are they hedging very strong GDP growth is coming at the same time as people are worried about the labor market? How do you explain that companies seem frozen in this low hire, low fire environment? You're not getting the turnover in labor that is so traditional in US companies. I could go on, but what I'm trying to convey to you is that there are major contradictions that suggest something deep. So what is that? The first and most important is the rise of what's called geo-economics. Not economics, geo-economics. The difference is fundamental. For a long time, we were in a world in which economic logic and commercial logic drove decisions. Today, we are in a world in which domestic politics, geopolitics are driving decisions. If you like, economics used to be behind the steering wheel, with domestic politics and geopolitics and national security next to it. Now economics is in the back seat. You see this domestically. I grew up in a world where the Washington consensus dominated. Something that's very familiar in this part of the world. If you want to prosper, you deregulate, you liberalize, you're fiscally responsible, and you have independent monetary policy. That world no longer exists. The US has decided to opt for a different one. Yes to deregulation, no to liberalization, fiscal deficits, and importantly, changing institutions. You see this in the consistently high fiscal deficits. The US runs a fiscal deficit of 6% of GDP. For the last few years, it's been 6 to 8% of GDP. At a time when they've had full employment. Why is that important? Because when you have full employment, you're collecting a lot of taxes. When you collect a lot of taxes, you reduce your deficit. Why? Because the day will come when you'll get a recession. But this hasn't been the case. And as a result, US debt has been going higher and higher. And we are now very near the all-time highs of just after the World Trade War. The Federal Reserve has been under attack. And one element of that is that inside the Federal Reserve, reforms are coming. So the conduct of monetary policy that influences so much of what happens in the world is changing. The relationship between the administration and corporates is changing. In the old days, you ignored Washington. Today, you have to understand how Washington operates, and you have to converse with an administration that's much more open to talking to companies than it has in the past. And then finally, we all know about tariffs. This is no longer the world of ever closer globalization. The ever closer integration of trade, investments, and other aspects. This at best is a managed globalization life. And it depends critically on the relationship between China and the US. And as you can see from these headlines, that relationship is like a roller coaster, consistently under pressure and influencing others. So there's a massive policy-driven rewiring of the US economy. The closest you can get to it is you're as old as I am, President Ronald Reagan in the early 80s. When he came in and he decided the US needed to change in order to become more productive and more faster. It was an uncertain time, but it's a time that led to high growth. This time around, is Ronald Reagan on steroids, because the US is also trying to rewire the world. The second big influence is what the public sector is doing. It is rewiring itself. Why? Because of innovation. We will hear a lot about artificial intelligence, but that is only one of 4 innovations that will completely change how we do things. AI, life sciences, robotics, and plastic. Each of them is changing very quickly. The first 3 are going to come together in the next 5 years, and after that, quantum also. If you want to know how fast, think about what did we know about AI 3 years ago, when ChatGPT appeared. AI was this thing that you ask a question, you get an answer, most of the time it's correct, but there are mistakes. 2 years ago, AI became something different. You give it a task, write me a letter, write me an essay, do research on this, and it gives you an answer. Mistakes were still there, but much less. Today, AI is intellectual companion. It's like having someone at your fingertips with 1,000 PhDs able to help you. That happened in only 3 years. Imagine what's going to happen in the next few years. That is going to rewire economies, it's going to rewire the world, whether we like it or not. And then finally, resilience. We heard about resilience earlier. There's a fundamental lesson that was learned during the pandemic, is we should not just focus on efficiency, but also on resilience. What are the implications for business? They are fundamental, absolutely fundamental. First and foremost, resilience becomes a strategic objective. In the old days, it was just in case. Now, it is, you've got to make sure you have a plan B and a plan C, because the world can change on you very quickly. Secondly, governments are bad for business, especially in America. You have to understand how governments function. You cannot ignore governments. Third, political alignments are as important as commercial alignments. Your decision making has to reflect the geopolitical reality. The most booming job today in US companies is chief geopolitical officer. That job does not exist in Sweden. And finally, you've got to combine the typical commercial side that companies do very well with the geopolitical side. What about countries outside the US? Most are trying to understand these changes. And most are worried. They are worried because of the tension between the US and China. What I hear going around the world is, please don't ask us to choose. We don't want to choose between China and the US. Some countries have gone one step further. Some countries are trying to de-risk themselves from the border system. And the question I get asked a lot of the time is, how has Russia done it? How has Russia managed to survive 3 years when it's been thrown out of the Soviet Union? And this image that was put all over the world a few weeks ago of the presidents of China, the Prime Minister of India, and the President of Russia was meant to tell the rest of the world, we can offer you an alternative to the US. That is why you hear the word fragmentation. We heard it in the previous speech, this notion that the world is going to fragment. Most countries don't know how to navigate this world. It's a new world. It's a world of uncertainty. But we are part of the world best placed to navigate this. There's a handful of countries that have special characteristics that allow them to be what are called politically swing states. Countries that can operate with different poles in this multipolar world. The UAE is one of them. Others include India, Brazil, they include Saudi Arabia, they include Turkey. But there are a very small number of countries that are uniquely positioned in that way. And the UAE in particular is viewed as a neutral hub for trade, for finance, for culture, for tourism. That is a very unique positioning in the fragmented world. But there's something else about the UAE, and that is its adoption of the change, its understanding of the importance of supply chains, and how that, including the charter, the warehouses, and everything else that has been done here, allows you to position yourself for a world where the supply chains are changing every single day. And also AI. UAE is ahead in the race not just to work on AI, but to work with AI. And it is the work with AI that will determine productivity gains, that will determine growth. The strategic vision is clearly captured by the importance of generating growth, of enhancing government efficiency, of cultivating talent, and of increasing governance and ethics of AI. But this is about big AI. What about small AI? It's the notion of putting AI in the hands of each citizen. I go around the world a lot, and I have not seen a single country that is more advanced in diffusing AI than the UAE. Why? Because of the visionary leadership that you see in this country among peoples. Let me conclude by saying the following. Do not get fooled by what you see on the surface. Look one level below and try to explain the contradictions, the changes. And if you do that, you will realize the importance of embracing three changes. Policy-driven changes, the second on transformational innovation, and resiliency. Those are the three major forces that are going to be with us, not for 1 year, but for 5 years and a minute. Because of that, geoeconomics becomes a very important thing to understand. How economic decisions are driven not just by economic logic, but by national politics, geopolitics, and national security. And finally, once you get that framework, you realize why the UAE's success is not just about today, but I'm sure it's going to be about tomorrow. Thank you very much.